All right, welcome back to the RS Exchange. Zambia's central bank has slashed the country's key rate by 75 points to 13.5% as inflation dived below 10% with an outlook of 7% for the year 2026. Let's get more from the central bank governor, Dr. Denny Keliade, at his post-MPC briefing on Wednesday.
The Monetary Policy Committee decided to reduce the monetary policy rate by 75 basis points to 13.5%. That is, we reduced the policy rate by 0.75% to 13.5 percentage point to 13.5%. What underlies this decision? The committee took into account the following factors. One, that there had been a further decline in inflation in the fourth quarter of 2025. Then when we did projections, which we normally do during these meetings, we observed that the inflation is projected to fall faster into the 6 to 8% target band than our forecast showed in November last year. And thirdly, with these factors taking place, that is the inflation coming down and the projection also showing that it's going to come down even further, it was necessary that we look at the stance of monetary policy and maintain it at an appropriate level. So that was the other overriding reason why we had to make the 75 basis point adjustment to the policy rate. Now, where is this coming from? So we start from the inflation outlook, or outturn, sorry. Inflation continued to decelerate in the fourth quarter of 2025. Overall inflation 25 from 12.3% in September 2025. I think this is better explained in a table which I turn to now. This is the regular table that we share with you, but you see the progression. It's divided into two parts. We have the average, which is the top part of the table, and then the end period numbers in the bottom part of the table. So if you cast your eyes now to the first row below, the row below the dates, you will see that inflation, overall inflation, has been coming down. Actually, if you go back to Q1 2025, you will see that it was 16.7, it came down to 15.3, then 12.3 in the third quarter, which is the quarter I was referring to when we met in November last year. And currently, for the fourth quarter, it is at 11.3%. Now, when you look at the components of that, which is food and non-food, you note that they obviously were the ones driving that. They were coming down. You see that in the case of non-food inflation, actually it came at the top end of the target band at 8%.
All right, let's move on to Kenya, where the central bank governor, Dr. Kamau Tuje, briefed the press today on the 25 basis points interest rate cut delivered on Tuesday by the Monetary Policy Committee as the regulator looks to further stimulate credit into East Africa's biggest economy.
The Monetary Policy Committee met yesterday, February the 10th, 2026, and made the following decisions. They lowered the central bank rate by 25 basis points to 8.75% from 9%. It also further strengthened the effectiveness of the monetary policy implementation framework, and to enhance the monetary policy transmission, PC approved the narrowing of the interest rate corridor around the central bank rate from the current plus or minus 75 basis points to plus or minus 50 basis points. The committee also adjusted the applicable interest rate on the discount window from the current 75 basis points above the CBR to 50 basis points, which is the upper bound of the interest rate corridor. The MPC observed that overall inflation is expected to remain below the midpoint of the target range in the near term, and that this will be supported by stable prices of processed food items and energy, and stability in the exchange rate. It also observed that central banks in the major economies have continued to ease monetary policy, but at a cautious and uneven pace depending on their inflation and growth outlooks. They also noted that the average lending rates in the domestic market have continued to decline, while private sector credit growth has continued to improve, though at a slower pace than is desirable. The committee therefore concluded that there was scope for a further easing of the monetary policy stance by reducing the CBR by 25 basis points. This will augment the previous policy actions, which were aimed at stimulating lending by banks to the private sector and supporting economic activity, while ensuring inflationary expectations remain firmly anchored and that the exchange rate also remains stable. The narrowing of the interest rate corridor in the monetary policy implementation framework will further support the alignment of the Kenya shilling overnight interbank average (KESONIA) to the policy rate, the CBR. And finally, the interest rate on the CBK discount window is set at the upper bound of the corridor to ensure that KESONIA remains within a predictable range. The MPC will closely monitor the impact of these policy decisions, as well as developments in the global and domestic economies, and stands ready to take further action as necessary in line with its mandate.